What's up, folks? Good to see you again. I know it's been a while. I'm going to keep this preamble short because I got a great episode for you today. I'm talking with Appalachian literary icon and Pulitzer Prize winning author of Demon Copperhead, right behind me there, Barbara Kingsolver. I've been wanting to get her on this show for a long time, and I'm so excited. This was a fantastic interview. I really loved it. And, one of the best parts about it is she talks about what she did with the royalty money that she made from Demon Copperhead, because she made a lot of money on that book. That book was massively successful. And so, unlike other authors who had massively successful books about Appalachia, and I won't name any names here, but maybe a high-ranking government official in the United States federal government, perhaps, she decided to do something good with the money that she made from it. In fact, she is using some of the royalties from Demon Copperhead to open a women's addiction recovery residence in Southwest Virginia and Appalachia. I think it's fantastic. We talk a lot about that, and I think that you'll really enjoy it. First, before the interview, I just want to make a quick plug. I've been doing this show for about 5.5 years. This is the first time I'll be doing it without a co-host. My co-host, Big John, he had to leave for work reasons and to focus on a few other things, which is great. I think that this show is going to go in a really positive direction. I'm excited to change things up a little bit, but even though it's a labor of love, it takes a lot of time and effort to put all this together every week. And so I have a Patreon and a Substack where if you're feeling generous, you can donate just a little bit of money each month. It would go a long way for me to reinvest in this show and also just to justify the time restraints it takes to put on this every week. But if you don't, that's totally fine. I'm just glad that you're here watching this. So without further ado, let's talk to Barbara Kingsolver. Hi, Barbara. How's it going?
It's going fine. How are you, Chuck?
I'm doing so well. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on this show and joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Well, you're welcome. Thanks for your interest. I like that book that's sitting right behind you in the bookshelf.
Yeah, strategically put there, right? I actually have several others of yours up here. I don't know if you can see them, but
I recognize them by the colors of the jackets. Lacuna is yellow. It's very it stands out. And I'm pretty sure I see Holding the Line there, which is a kind of a rusty orange. Um, anyway, yeah. Where are you?
I am
By the
based in Chattanooga. I actually just moved here just a few days ago, actually, so I'm just getting set up here.
Where
But
did you move from?
my wife and I have bounced around all over the place. I'm originally from West Virginia. We most recently moved from Florida, but I've lived in Nashville and then also Northern Virginia before that. So I've been kind of all around the East Coast, I guess you could say.
Whereabouts in Florida?
We were in So her family's from New Smyrna Beach, which is close to Daytona. So we were there for a little while and then in Gainesville for a little while. We were just trying to kind of figure out where we wanted to land, and coming back to Appalachia was definitely a high priority, and being somewhere where there's, mountains is always really nice.
Mountains and trees and yeah, and space between the people.
Yeah, that true.
Florida's intense. Florida is my younger daughter just moved back from Florida. She and her husband lived in Melbourne for
Hmm.
3 years while she was in graduate school, and they are so glad to be back.
Yeah, it's a interesting place, and there's things I love about it, but it's hard to live there, I think, is how I would describe it.
Yeah, yeah, especially if you have a kind of a normal or modest income. Um, but yeah, I mean, we went there often to visit them, and one of the weirdest things I think is the way people drive. Just the traffic. Just when you cross the border into at Jacksonville, from Georgia into Florida, you instantly know you're in Florida because
Hmm.
people drive so much faster and so much more aggressively, and pass you on the shoulder on the left, and it's crazy.
Oh yeah,
uh, I
they're
just wonder
nuts.
how can all those people be having babies at once?
That's a great question. Though your point about the driving does make a lot of sense when you see all of the personal injury attorney signs peppered throughout the state. I'm sure they get plenty of those calls.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, they told me, Lily and Philip said, I mean, nobody has any one real explanation. But if you look at the statistics, the highest death rates are on Florida interstates in the
Really?
country. Yes, Interstate 4 is the worst.
Checks out. Yeah.
And then the second worst, I think, is 95 in that stretch from Jacksonville to, Fort Pierce, wherever. And they said one hypothesis is that in Florida, you don't have to log hours behind the wheel to get your driver's license. You just take a test,
Interesting.
which is very different. I mean, here my kids they had to keep logbooks and log hundreds of hours
Yeah.
both in daylight and after dark. And you really have to learn to drive before with a a certified person in the car, an adult. In order to get a license, and they just they just kind of hand them out. So that would explain some of it.
That's really surprising because yeah, when I got my learner's permit and then my license in West Virginia, like my parents had a signature, a log, and then they also put me through a thing through our insurance program where I had to drive with somebody that's certified by the insurance so we could get a discounted rate. But
Yeah.
yeah, that doesn't surprise me. I should ask my my wife's stepbrother, who is a injury attorney in Florida. I'm sure he would know the answer to that, and he's been very successful with accidents. So I mean, I'm sure he knows everything about it.
I'm sure he does. Yeah. Anyways, welcome back to the mountains. I don't know Chattanooga very well. Is it mountainous?
It is like in the sense it's like it's sort of at the tail end. It's not in the Smokies, but it's like it gets to be close to the Cherokee National Forest, and then you're within an hour or two, I think, from the Smokies, maybe a little bit further. But it's called the Scenic City because it's kind of nestled in a bit of a valley where like Signal Mountain and a couple of the other mountain ranges come up around it. And
Hmm.
it's really beautiful. In fact, there's a it's sort of a tourist trap, but it's a cool one. Rock City there, where there's a point where you can see you're up high enough you can see all
Seven
seven
states.
states. Yeah,
See
exactly.
seven states from Rock City. Those signs have been up on the highway, like 300 miles in every direction. I remember from when I was a kid, when we would be driving to see, relatives somewhere, we would see those signs. See seven states from Rock City. We always wanted to go to Rock City. I have not been.
It is one
My
of
parents never obliged.
we finally bit the bullet because like my wife and I lived in Nashville. So when you take the highway down to Chattanooga, I mean you get peppered with those signs. And so we
Yeah.
finally were like, okay, let's do it. And like it's beautiful that overlook, but the rest of it is impossible to describe. It's just one of those things you kind of have to witness. It's very much like a touristy kind of thing, but it is fun. It's definitely worth it. It's worth paying whatever the fee is.
I'm kind of guessing like Gatlinburg on steroids or something like
It
that.
it definitely would it definitely would feel at home in Gatlinburg. I'll say that. Yeah, Gatlinburg
Okay.
Pigeon Forge for
Okay.
sure,
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
sure. Um,
Anyway, well, I'm glad you're back in the mountains or near
yeah,
about striking distance.
yeah, I
Um,
am too.
have you done this I'm sorry, I don't know a lot about your podcast. Have you been doing it all along from these other non-Appalachian places?
Yeah, so I've had a co-host for most of it, and so I've been the Appalachian expat for the most part, and then my co-host is typically because both of my co-hosts that I've had have lived in West Virginia, so
Hmm.
and we've been doing it. We started in very late 2019, so we've been going for a little while now, and yeah, so this is ironically my one co-host that I had, my friend John had to leave in order he has work obligations that are just taking him away from the show. He's a public defender. And so, but ironically, at the same time, I was moving back to the region. So it kind of worked out for me, at least from a credibility standpoint, I guess you could say.
Right. Yeah. We're,
Um,
we're, we're looking askance at you if you're doing this from Florida.
right, exactly. And believe me, I took plenty of guff from that and I understand it.
But I also know if you grew up in West Virginia, you're Appalachian. What part of West Virginia? I'm sorry, I'm
yeah.
interrogating you.
No,
I
no,
did.
this is totally fine. So I grew up in Parkersburg, which is right on the Ohio West Virginia border.
Okay.
In fact, my dad worked in Ohio his pretty much his entire life. He worked at a manganese plant there. So yeah, I was there. I was in West Virginia until I was 22, and then I went up to Michigan for law school.
Uh-huh. And you learned to code switch like I did.
Yeah, it was so weird, like leaving because, like in West Virginia, especially when you go to like college in West Virginia, I went to WVU and then Shepherd University, which is a much smaller school. You don't really meet a lot of people that you don't meet a lot of people that aren't from West Virginia, especially Shepherd.
Right,
And then I went
right.
up to Michigan and there was literally nobody
Yeah.
in my class. And I was like, this is weird. And I'm looked at as like, oh, you're a novelty. You're a unique specimen to us. And I was like, this is very interesting. Okay.
Yeah, well, you're lucky if they said novelty or unique specimen. I got more like, oh, haha, look at you, you're wearing shoes.
Oh,
I
yeah,
was,
I got
I
that
was,
too. Don't
cor
worry.
I was corrected on my pronunciation, by professors who were not. I mean, there's nothing wrong with saying steel and I will be and stuff like that, but they all,
Mhm.
I was treated as like a subspecies, I would say, a
Oh,
subcategory of human. And this was DePaul University. This was in the middle of Indiana. This was
mhm.
not even like, New York City or anything like
Interesting.
but yeah, yeah, so I learned to I learned to hide my accent just so that people would take me seriously.
Mhm.
And then, but then you code switch because, then somebody from home calls and you say, "Hi, Mama." It just comes right back. So, but I've been back here in Southwest Virginia for 25 years. So I've now lived in Appalachia much longer than I was out of Appalachia. I was out for about 20 years. So 2/3 of my life I've been here.
That's wonderful. Yeah,
It
and,
is.
to your point about the accents, I mean, I can't tell you how many people I've talked to just from doing this show because we've done a couple accent projects where people have sent in like audio clips of their accents, and I can't tell you how many people are like, "I wish I could have done this, but like I lost my accent because everybody I knew, some people well-meaning, some people maybe not as well-meaning, told me to suppress it or get rid of it because nobody would take me seriously, like in a professional
Right,
environment." And I
right.
mean, in some instances like that was like valid advice, but it's a shame that it had to be like that, and it makes me really sad
Well,
that people had to lose their accent for that.
yeah. I mean, it's stealing your voice, and for me as a writer, um, it was very damaging to me as a writer to feel like I had to hide who I was because your voice is what you have, and it's not just your accent, it's your diction, the way you put words together. I completely suppressed for close to 10 years of my life, and my writing was for shit. I mean, it was terrible because I was writing from this imaginary place that was nowhere real. And it wasn't until I really kind of reckoned with this and understood that sort of that shame that had been
Mm-hmm.
imposed on me and how wrong that was, how what bigotry that is, no better than racism or, sexism or classism.
Absolutely.
Um, and had to just consciously recover my voice. And it wasn't until then that I could really write anything that was worth reading.
Yeah, that's interesting how that translated for you. That's really, I mean, that's good to hear, and I'm glad that like you were able to like get that back and not lose it forever because I mean, so many people it's like they can't they're like I couldn't recreate my accent if I tried just because it's been however many years since I was getting rid of it and now this is just how I talk and it's like it's something that's a form of bigotry that I don't know. One of the goals of our show has been to try to do our part, what little part we have at stamping that out and being and like instilling pride in people's accents because
Yeah,
it is a real signifier of where you're from and who you are. And so
it is.
I love that.
It was your podcast, right, that recorded people saying, "I'm Appalachian and this is how I say Appalachia."
Yeah.
I love that. I love that
Thank you.
so much. Yeah.
It was a really fun thing to it was boy, it was a undertaking editing those individual clips. I think there was over 1,500 by the end of it, so it took quite a while.
Really,
But it was a labor of
really.
love, and it was really cool to go back and listen to all of them and see like the little subtle nuances and differences, even in the
Yeah.
same area.
Yeah, even in the same area, even in the same county, depending on like who your parents are,
Mm-hmm.
and it's fascinating, but it's also beautiful. I mean, our language is so beautiful, and I it's one of the reasons I have always insisted on doing my own audiobooks,
Yeah.
on narrating my own audiobooks if they are Appalachian, if they have Appalachian characters. I'm doing those characters. I'm not trusting those to anybody else because outsiders cannot fake it. Or if they do, I mean, maybe some professionals can, professional actors can, but we all get so tired of just, well, in film, somehow Appalachia is completely conflated with the South. So it's like there's
Yeah,
a
yeah.
Southern accent that's supposed to represent all of us, which is so irritating, and sort of also tone deaf. We don't sound like that. But anyway, with Demon Copperhead, because it is a first person story told by a young man, I couldn't do it myself.
Mm-hmm.
And that just didn't make sense. I didn't think readers would buy me as a 13-year-old boy. I can do a lot. I can do a lot of voices, but so I auditioned I auditioned readers carefully, and I chose Charlie Thurston, and I think he did just a great job. In fact, I was surprised because he's not from here, but he's a pro, and he did a great job.
That's really cool. I haven't listened to the audiobook version of it. But you brought that up. Did you do the audio book? Like, did you do the voice for Poisonwood Bible, or was that?
That's the only other one I did not do because I had just had a baby and
Mhm.
they needed me to go into the studio immediately. And at that time, now I do my audiobooks in a studio that's here in Bristol, the birthplace of country music. So they have recording studios there, and that's just, a 30-minute drive for me. So I can go down there. Because, it takes a lot of days to record an audiobook.
Yeah, of
Uh,
course.
a lot of days in the studio, and I just wasn't able to do that when when they needed, they're very urgent about it. They suddenly say, "Oh, we need this recorded right now," because they like to release the audiobooks the same time they release the print book, and now the ebook as well. So I just could not, as a mother of a very young child, I could not do it. So again, I was particular about who recorded it, and it's an actor um, who's from Louisville, Kentucky, and so
Hmm.
she did a decent job. Those characters are not technically they're not Appalachian. They're from Georgia. They're
Georgia,
from
yeah.
the South. But I just wanted to make sure that it was, an accent that was reasonable, and she did a great job. Um, and it's funny, she sounds enough like me. Her vocal quality is similar enough to mine that a lot of people think that is me if they don't read the fine print on the on the
Oh,
jacket of the
interesting.
audiobook. They tell me, "Oh, you did a great job of recording um, Poisonwood Bible," and I say, "Oh, thank you."
Well, that's a good segue because I love that book, and it's interesting because it's still one of my favorite books, and actually I should give credit. My sister wanted me to tell you that it is still her favorite book. We both read it because in our AP English class in high school, it was assigned to us as reading, and at that point, I was like, that was a point in my life where I was like, I was just not into reading books at that point. And you get assigned a lot of these books. Some of them are good and some of them are not interesting to a high school boy. But I
Yeah.
remember my sister being like, really read Poisonwood Bible because you're going to really, really like it. And I remember loving that book. I thought it was so unique how you broke the chapters up from the different voices of the characters in the family. And it was just, it really kickstarted my enjoyment for reading again. So I want to credit you with that. And it was just a really great book. So I really appreciate you writing that book. And
Thank you.
I hope you know that it's at least being assigned reading in some West Virginia high school classes, and as well as in Philadelphia too. Because I just talked to a colleague who had Poisonwood Bible as an assigned reading in their class too.
Yeah, it has been yeah, it's been incorporated into the AP Lit curriculum. It's a I think it's a challenging book for a high school student, but it's also I really appreciate that it is kind of been absorbed into the canon because um it asks kids to really look outside of uh, their own world in so many ways and to understand how what is right in one place could be altogether wrong in another place. This is we are not the only people and not the only country in the world, not the only righteous. So I think that makes me happy that kids are getting that. We
Yeah,
need more of that right now.
absolutely. Could not agree more. I have a few questions about your book, and then I obviously want to talk about Higher Ground.
Good.
Something that stuck out about Demon Copperhead that I think is very relevant to this show is that when you were talking about it, you said you wanted it to be the great Appalachian novel. I think that was the direct quote. And I'm curious if you could explain like what you meant by that, what that meant to you, and why you wanted it to be that.
Well, um, as we discussed earlier, I grew up in Kentucky thinking, well, this is a fine place to be from, this tiny little town in northeastern Kentucky, this free range childhood I had, roaming in the woods and fishing in the creeks and, living in this place where everybody knows your business and, everybody gossips about you, but they also look after you and care about you. And it just, I hadn't really put it in any kind of context until I left Kentucky, went to college. I was very lucky to get to go to college. I was one of the few people in my high school who got to do that. But what a shock, what a culture shock it was for so many reasons of place, of geography and class to arrive in this college where people came from such privileged backgrounds and had all already I don't know, their schools clearly were teaching them things that mine wasn't. I
Yeah.
had a lot of catching up to do. Um, and to arrive in a place where people just assumed that I was backward and dumb because of my accent and where I was from. And have spent my whole adult life dealing with that kind of bigotry and exploring, sort of what's behind it. Why is it, for example, that nobody outside of this region knows how to even pronounce Appalachia? They say Appalachia. Well, okay, think about that. This is a big part of the country. Imagine if people didn't know how to pronounce what, like Chicago? What if they said Chicago?
Mhm.
What if they said Seattle? I mean, it's a huge part of the country, and the fact that nobody outside of here knows even how to say it tells you we are not represented in American media. We are represented by outsiders. We show up in movies or television when they need the butt of a joke, when
Right.
they need a dumb character or when they want a poverty documentary or something like that. We have not had the opportunity to speak for ourselves to, a larger audience. We have a rich history of writers, Harriet Arno, Robert Penn Warren, Wendell Berry, so many Kentucky authors, but somehow we haven't broken across into the cultural mainstream to the extent that people really know us. And even, as time has gone by and I have gained more, sort of found my feet and have gained a lot of pride of place, pride in my culture and love for my place. I haven't seen this change. And in fact, I feel like the cultural divide between the so-called urban elites and the big rural, kind of middle has gotten worse and
Yeah.
it has gotten very dangerous. It's so many of us rural people people who don't live in big cities, who have no opportunity to either see ourselves or speak for ourselves, um, feel so angry at whoever's, seems to be, appears to be in charge, that they were willing to just like vote for a candidate that had nothing to offer really except exploding the system. That tells you we've got a really serious problem. This resentment, even though, I didn't vote that way, I understand the resentment. I
Absolutely.
feel there's an enormous need for us to speak for ourselves and explain these problems we have in a cultural and historical context. Because yes, we do have problems. Yes, we are the poorest big region of the country. Yes, we do have very limited educational and economic opportunities. Okay, you know why that is? That's because the coal companies, when they came in here to,
Mhm.
to pull out the coal, they deliberately kept out other mills and factories and any other kind of employment that could compete, because they wanted bodies to put in the mines. They didn't want those bodies to be educated, so they suppressed our culture of education. People, I think, don't understand that the coal companies owned everything. They
Everything.
didn't just own the mines, they owned the courthouse and the school
And the
and the
churches and yep.
hospital and everything.
Hmm.
So this was done to us. And so certain books, that came out that were very popular that sort of explained hillbillies, I don't want to name any names, but um, you
Perhaps
know,
high-ranking government leaders.
right, high-ranking government leaders who got out, who somehow managed to go to Yale, which is a place I had honestly never heard of. I'd never heard of Harvard or Yale till I was in my 20s. So somehow he had a path to Yale, um, and he then kind of did this big, memoir that's supposed to kind of be explaining all of this, saying, well, those of us who stay behind are just losers. That pissed me off.
Yeah.
And I just thought that what's absent is the context. I want to tell a story that's the whole story. And that's a hard thing to do in a novel, but that puts our problems, that looks compassionately at these problems we have, including the latest round of exploitation, which was the pharmaceutical companies who came in to harvest our pain to make money off of our vulnerability, to put all that in the context that people would understand and have some sympathy for what we're up against, and also some appreciation for the fact that we have survived. We have survived because we are tough and resilient, and we're people made of community. We take care of each other. We make our own everything. We're resourceful. I wanted to tell that whole story. It's a huge story. How to get that into one novel is something that just had been weighing on me for about a decade. Because I knew I had to do it and I couldn't figure out how. And then I found the way in, the doorway in to rewrite David Copperfield, to take Dickens's, sort of social sort of anger and passion for social justice and pull it straight into modern times, because the problems he wrote about, orphans and institutional poverty, are still right here with us.
Absolutely.
So that was the story of Demon Copperhead.
I love that explanation. I really appreciate you walking through that because that gives so much proper context to like what the intent was behind it. And I agree with you. I think like so many people are lacking the context, historical and cultural and otherwise, about Appalachia, about the states in Appalachia, and what they're a lot in my experience, because I've been doing this podcast for almost 6 years and fielding a lot of ignorance on social media and otherwise. And what you realize is a lot of people don't really understand or know anything about the region other than the immediate political context of it. Like, are they a red or blue state? That like dumb binary that tells you not much about an actual state or anything. And
Right.
so I think that's a a really compelling reason to have a book like Demon Copperhead, because it does get, even though it's a fictional book, it provides real actual context. Like when you mention, the coal companies exploited people, and then the pharmaceutical companies exploited the pain. The pain a lot of times was caused by the coal companies.
Right,
It
exactly. And I mean, this is what just kills me. Purdue Pharma, they looked at metrics and they chose, they pointed on the map to these three places
Yep.
to as their sort of the holes they were going to pump in their addictive juice. One of them was Lee County, one of them was around Huntington, West Virginia.
Yep.
They chose these places because there are uh, there are a lot of work injuries, a lot of chronic injuries, and even more to the point, very, very fragile healthcare delivery systems.
Yeah.
We have so few hospitals and so few doctors that the ones we have are stretched too thin. They can't spend enough time with patients. They see a patient that they might not see again for a year. So they don't have the opportunity to say, well, I'll refer you to a pain clinic. We don't have those here. We don't have any specialists in this region. You have to go to another state. So it was very methodical. They said, okay, these doctors are going to need what we're offering them, which is a miracle painkiller that they can write a prescription for and and satisfy these patients because they don't have the other resources that would be better.
Yeah.
That's evil. That is just flat out evil. And the opioid epidemic is still with us, and it worries me that people think that story is over because they have read or they have seen Dope Sick, which I have immense respect for Beth Macy, and that's a very good that's really good journalism covering the way, these lawsuits were actually the first doctor to sound the alarm was Dr. Van Zee in Lee County here,
Hmm.
saying this is very addictive, and the pushing and pushing back against, all the people who were defending Purdue all the way up to the top, and finally forcing them to reformulate their drug and also to pay, enormous sums supposedly for recompense for the damage they'd caused. It's not coming here. It is that money is not here. I worried that people would, see that story and say, okay, justice has been
Yeah.
done. The bad guys were brought to justice, so it's over. It's not over. The orphans of this epidemic are still here. They're coming up through our schools. If you came to visit me, I could walk you down the road and I could show you the grandparents who are raising little ones are who have lost their parents to addiction. They're either incarcerated or they're dead.
Yeah.
That those kids are growing up here with the same kinds of trauma that pull people into addiction. And this is a disease that will only be can only be cured by compassion and resources, money and assistance and medical care. That's only going to come if people understand that the problem is still here and that it is a disease like cancer. It's not a moral failing, it is a
Exactly.
disease.
Absolutely. I think that's a perfect segue to talk about higher ground. I did want to really quickly ask you if you have you read the book Death and Mudlick from Eric Eyre. He's a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist from West Virginia.
I know about that book. It's actually here on my desk. I haven't read it yet.
Oh,
I'm looking.
perfect. It's
Yeah,
good. It contextualizes some of the opioid epidemic in West Virginia, less centered on the pharmaceutical companies, more on like the distribution pipeline of like the
yeah,
pill mills and all that. It's very
yeah,
interesting, great reporting. But yeah, I mean, to your point, like the opioid companies, like the pharmaceutical companies, they are the chief purveyor, but they're not the only purveyor of it for sure.
yeah. It's like they started it and then it perpetuates itself. And a big part of the problem is a failure of compassion. Um,
Absolutely.
People and that comes from a half a century of the so-called war on drugs that this government has run, which is sort of selective incarceration and punishment of black people, of hippies or whatever,
Yeah.
the like the targets of the decade. But what they've done, is they said, I mean, I remember DARE officers coming into the school, and then they came into my daughter's schools to say, bad people do drugs. It's a failure of virtue. All you have to do is say no. Just like no understanding and no sympathy for this very complicated and devastating disease. And it blows my mind that people teach such callous misinformation. Imagine teaching kids that a disease is the fault of the sick person. Like, imagine saying, well, people with cancer are just bad people. You should kick them out of your house when they get cancer. That's what we've been doing.
Yeah.
And that lack of sympathy, I think, has led to, I mean, we're resources flow from compassion. People vote for and support programs because of who they care about. So that's what we're dealing with, and that's what I hoped I could address with Demon Copperhead, to get people kind of inside of this world, to the point that they could see, oh, this could happen to anybody. This happens to good people. It happens sometimes to people who are just following doctor's orders, um,
Absolutely.
very often. So this is something that I am seeing shift here, because compassion comes with exposure, right? I mean, racism tends to crumble in places where people of different races can become friends. Likewise, homophobia really kind of has to reckon with itself when suddenly you realize you have a gay son or daughter. This is when we know the so-called other that we're afraid of. When we know them personally, and love them, then our biases break down. That's how it happens. So I think with the opioid crisis, at least in this region, some of the biases and the stigma has broken down, because there is not a family I know of here that is untouched
Yeah.
by this crisis. Everybody knows somebody. Everybody has lost somebody to this crisis. So what we're seeing, and I mean, I do want to talk about higher ground, but what we're seeing is that people who, 10 years ago might have said, not in my backyard, are very different now, are saying, yes, in my backyard. I really want to do something to help
Yeah.
people in recovery. So
Yeah.
that's
I,
what we are.
I mean, I think to your point of like, it's hard to find a family in Appalachia and the whole region pretty much that hasn't been affected by this, or at least hasn't been tangentially touched by the opioid crisis. And, unlike certain high ranking government officials that had a really successful book about Appalachia, you took some of the success in the form of royalties from Demon Copperhead and reinvested, I guess you could say, in the region with Higher Ground Women's Recovery Center. And I was wondering if you could talk just a little bit about like how you got to that point. And because like I mean, this Demon Copperhead was about as successful as any book could get. It won the Pulitzer. It was Oprah Book Club. I mean, you probably made quite a bit of money off it. You could have done anything with that money. What led you and what compelled you to want to do this?
Um, Yes, you're right. This book amazed me with its success. I was just hoping this kid would get a fair hearing, and I was amazed that, he has been embraced all across this country, and then across the world in
Yeah.
something like 40 translations. So yeah, uh, Demon brought home a lot of bacon. There were a lot of royalties these first couple of years. An author's income ebbs and flows. We never
Right.
know. And it's really funny on tax, we pay our quarterly taxes, and you have to predict how much you're going to make that year. No clue. No
Yeah.
idea ever, because how do I know what books people are going to buy? So, you have to guess. But my my income fluctuates wildly from one year to the next. I have always believed that the secret to happiness is low expectations in materially, not spiritually, but materially. I live a pretty low overhead life. I live on a farm. I raised my kids to value, kindness and to believe that what you do in the world that is your value and not what you have in the world. So we're not very materialistic people. So when this windfall came to us, we didn't want to change our lives. I wouldn't even know how to spend money like that.
Yeah.
Um, so I said, well, obviously, Lee County, Southwest Virginia gave me this story. Obviously, I need to give it back, and I know that it needs to go into the recovery community because as I said before, all this money is supposed to be out there somewhere, but it's not coming here. It's not coming to the people who need it. And the greatest, so I mean, just in literal terms, what I did was I called my friends who I had met, while researching this novel, Dr. Van Zee and other people who are working in the recovery community, and said, "Let me take you to breakfast. We had a meeting. We had breakfast together at Applebee's, and I just asked, okay, where is the greatest need?" And everybody from physicians to social workers to, sort of counselors, everybody agreed the greatest need is for recovery homes to bridge this precarious gap. When someone gets out of drug court or rehab, they often, okay, they've been sober for one day or whatever,
Right.
1 week or whatever it's been. They often have no family or friends who will support their sobriety. They generally have no skills, no transportation, no opportunity to get, usually not even a driver's license at this point, because they've lost so much. No job prospects, no place to live. That like, how do you get to a secure, sober, self-confident, productive life on your own? It's just about impossible, which causes relapse after relapse.
Absolutely.
So, to get people across that precarious bridge, which takes months or even years, um, to give them a safe place to live while they gain confidence in their sobriety, while they learn skills, get their GED, take job training, um, to have a family of people, like a new created family of your the other people in your house who are supportive of your sobriety, who have meetings with you, who go to meetings with you, uh, who help you get a library card and read books, just to build a new life. That's what's needed, and that's not just, you can't just write a check and buy that. You have to create that. So what I could write a check for is to buy a house. So we went to Lee County. We looked around, we looked at a bunch of houses, and we found one that seemed perfect for the job. And we bought it. Demon Copperhead bought that house. We needed a new roof, so we put a bright red roof on it and a bright red door. It's the house that Demon built. And then with my friends, we put together a board of directors and created the Higher Ground nonprofit, because you can have a house, but to make it a home, you need a group of people who make all the decisions.
Hmm.
How will this house be run? How will you organize the drug testing? How will you organize transportation for medical care? How will you help people navigate all the paperwork for their, Medicaid or for their GED? Organize their transportation, connect them with the resources they need. This is an ongoing process. So we need people to write grants. We hired a director. So this is what I hoped and what I believed is that I could make a place for those resources are out there. The compassion is out there. I just needed to make a place for it to land. I figured if you build it, they will come. And that's what has happened. And this wonderful board of directors that I work with, 10, about 8 other people that we meet, they show up, every month. We have our meetings. We've hired a wonderful director who works directly with these women. The house filled up very quickly. Um, the need is so great. It's in Pennington Gap, Virginia, that we have taken a big step and we've purchased the building next door to it.
Oh, wow.
Um,
That's amazing.
and yeah, and we have plans for expansion, plans to create a business there, a thrift shop that the women can run. So that because a thrift shop is about the kind of store that you need in Pennington Gap. Um, and so they can learn the skills of running a business, and we have all kinds of ideas and plans for expansion and more residence opportunities. So it's just been one of the most exciting things I've ever gotten to be associated with because the people are so kind and good. The residents are so inspiring, and the community has been so welcoming. As I was saying, maybe 10 years ago, they would have said, not in my backyard. This year, I mean, we bought the house last summer and it has all come together in just a matter of months. People said, what can we do? Church groups got together and adopted rooms in the house to bring, furniture and quilts and, things to hang on the wall. Local people did yard, to clean. The house was kind of, we had to do a lot of work on it. People volunteered to do work, to do yard work, to do construction work, every kind of volunteerism you could hope for. It has just been so inspiring to me, makes me feel so good about being a person, alive
Yeah.
in this time and in this place, despite many ugly things going on in the world. I live in a place where people really care about each other. And so, as to show our gratitude to the community, this Saturday on June 7th, we're having a big open house and celebration for the community. We're inviting, it's a free event. We're having it's at the community center in Pennington Gap, and then the theater. We have an evening program in the theater, which will be music and artists and me. I'll talk about the history of this project, and the residents will talk a little bit about what it's like to live in the house. We have Beth Snap performing, a fabulous local musician. And in
Mm.
the afternoon, actually, and the theater's already sold out. I mean, sold. It's free tickets, but they're already spoken for, so the seats are filled. But the afternoon, all afternoon, from 3 to 6, in the community center, we're having an open house where people can come and talk to us and meet us. And there's free food, which is provided by a wonderful a local Chef Travis Milton, and entertainment. We have another musician playing and a slideshow telling the kind of the whole story. So we're just welcoming the community in, and there's a shuttle so people can go over and tour the house and see it. And we just want to do this to thank the community because they have been so wonderful. And I think that they're going to go on being wonderful.
Yeah. I love that. I love that so much that you're doing that for the community and that the community has been so receptive to this
Mhm,
because,
mhm.
I mean, Appalachia, like there can be some skepticism towards, anything that involves like somebody putting a lot of money into something, and a lot of times that's warranted just based on the history of the region. But I think that that's really wonderful that you're doing that, and that like it's been a community wide kind of project in a way, because that's I mean, I'm only speaking just from my own assumptions, but I think that with something like the opioid crisis and the addiction crisis, you really need a community of support.
You do, and you're absolutely right. That is one thing about us, about Appalachians, for better and for worse, is that we're wary of outsiders. We have every reason to be,
Right.
or some big project, and also kind of wary of so-called charity. Because there is an implication of power imbalance
Right.
in charity. So it's I think the most successful projects here are those who come from the place itself and from the people ourselves. So I wanted to do this for my own local community. I didn't do this in West Virginia or there's other places that need it. I wanted to do it right here where I live. And as I said, I can put down, I can buy a house, but to make it a home, this is going to work if everybody gives what they have to give to it, and that it feels like this is something that came from us for us, that it belongs here, that it wasn't plunked down upon us by someone who doesn't get us. That's I think the key to all any kind of development project. It works best if the people in a place decide for themselves what it is they need and how they're going to be going, to go about creating it.
Yeah, I completely agree on everything you said, and I love that, and I love that like the initial just reception has been really positive because I mean something like this, you're right, is really needed, is desperately needed in these places that just lack these types of additional like I mean you could call it healthcare resources in a way because
Yeah,
addiction
absolutely.
is a disease and so
Yeah.
it's something that I think like you mentioned if you're just thrown back out on the streets or back into your normal life like the propensity for relapse is so high
Yeah.
and so something like that is so critically important. I wanted to ask because you said you're looking into you already bought the house next to it to
Yeah.
expand.
Yeah.
Is there
Yeah.
future plans to expand more, or are you just kind of waiting to see like how things go? I'm just curious
I
about the
think
long term goals.
Well, I think right now we're trying to honestly I've been amazed how much we've been able to accomplish in a year, and with and the support we've been able to generate. We certainly need more financial support. We need more grants. We are always looking at, this opioid abatement money should be out there. We should be able to tap into it. And we're just learning as we go because most of us on the board are new to it just hasn't been, this kind of thing hasn't been done much before.
Right.
Sort of a project that just bubbles up right out of a place from the people who live there. So we're learning as we go, and we don't have, a 10-year plan. We just saw that as quickly as we, have filled up this house, we need to think beyond it. And when it's actually a small apartment building immediately next door, came up for sale, and we had been looking for a place to open this thrift shop. We said, okay, here's our opportunity because it has retail space and it also has apartments. And what I would love to see is maybe another step towards independent living where women who are secure in their sobriety could perhaps rent an apartment to and be reunited with their kids.
Mm-hmm.
Something like that would be a wonderful goal. But we have to play everything by ear because we just like a writer, this nonprofit has no idea, what resources will be available to us this year and the next year and the year after that. So um, we just have the goal of supporting and helping women help themselves. And however that can be done, we're going to do it.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I love that. Uh, so I have one more question after this, but I wanted to ask because I know that a lot of our listeners will be really interested in learning more about Higher Ground and also how they can support this project. And I'm wondering what the best way for people who maybe don't live in Lee County or even near Lee County, but want to help with the mission, how they can help.
I'm so glad you asked that. We have a website. It's the name of our group is Higher Ground Women's Recovery Residence. So the website is hgwrr.org. So I'll repeat that again, hgwrr.org. If they follow me on Instagram, that's in my bio. There's a link in my bio. Um, but you can just go directly to that website, and there's a donate button on the website. You can donate directly, or you can send us a check, or you can look on. We try to keep an Amazon wish list of things that we need for the house. If you want to purchase something for the house, if you have skills that you could offer, either if you live in the area or remotely, anything that anyone can offer us, we are very happy to accept, because this is a project built by a community made out of love, and we're happy to get whatever kind of love people might want to offer us.
Yeah, I love that. This is, I mean, I'm so excited that you are doing this and that this is happening in a place that so desperately needs it. And I'm just excited to follow the journey of this organization and see it blossom because I just think that's really wonderful.
Thank you.
I do have one last question, which I forgot to ask before, about your novels. And I promised one of our listeners that I would ask this. So I don't want to put you on the spot, but I know that you mentioned that Demon was loosely based off of David Copperfield. Are
Mhm.
there other like classic literary novels that you would love to do something similar to write another Appalachian novel or write another novel in general, like based
That's
on
a
that one?
That's an interesting question. No, I never even imagined I would do this. It just kind of came to me in a weird, sort of a weird ethereal visit when I got to spend the night at the former home of Charles Dickens, the house where he wrote David Copperfield. And I had been trying to figure out for 2 or 3 years how to tell this story, because I thought nobody wants to read about orphans or poverty. And then I was in this house and I was actually sitting at his desk with all his stuff lying around. It was really weird. It was like he just stepped out. And his manuscripts and pens and things were lying around. And
Really?
I was looking out at the view that he was looking at when he wrote David Copperfield. And I kind of heard this voice bubbling up inside me saying, you think nobody wants to read about orphans or poverty? Come on, give me a break. You have to do this. But what he told me, I don't know how, but what I got from being in the presence of Dickens's, sort of spirit was to let the child tell the story. That was the piece I hadn't thought of, because the child, to tell it in the first person from the point of view of a child, is so vulnerable and so believable. You get past people's barriers and sort of these boundaries people set up against an adult telling a sad story. A child, oh, you're just going to listen to this kid. You're already on his side. That was such a trick. That was such a good trick that Dickens used, and he gave me that. And I actually laid out the plot pretty directly on top of David Copperfield. It was amazing how well it worked. It was just fun, kind of to translate the events of an orphan in Victorian England to the life events of a child in Southwest Virginia. The shoe polish factory becomes a junkyard behind a meth lab. You just kind of figure
Yeah.
out where's the child labor in Southwest Virginia. Well, it's in places like that, and it's in tobacco fields. That was really, the fun of it and the work of it was figuring out how to translate the story. And I loved it. It was really fun. And I also tell you that it was sort of like Charles Dickens wrote my first draft. I was sort of felt like I was cheating. So it was a great adventure to write the book. It was very hard work, of course, but work that I love. I had never imagined doing that. I never really want to do the same thing twice.
Yeah.
So every novel that I begin, I set out a challenge for myself. It's something I've never done before that I almost feel like maybe I can't do. It seems so hard I might fail. That's what gets me at my desk every morning, that sort of panicky, nervous thrill that this might be, that the plane might crash. But I get to keep working at it until the plane flies. Nobody sees my bad first drafts. But no, this is not a device I had ever imagined before that weird sort of inspiration. So I really can't imagine doing it again. The novel I'm working on now is not based on anything. I mean, it's just a work of pure imagination, but I'm really enjoying it. It's a love story, and it's about Appalachia, and it's about a musician, a woman who plays the piano. And what I'm finding as I write it that interests me very much is I'm very interested in the barriers, the class barriers, the barriers between working class people and rural people, and what we kind of call high arts, like classical music, like
Hmm.
oil painting, those art forms that feel inaccessible to kids like I was growing up in Kentucky. Did I ever imagine I could write novels when I grew up? No, I did not. That was absolutely not available to me. I feel like maybe this isn't true, but if I had been a kid in Kentucky saying, I'm going to write novels when I grow up, I think people would have either laughed at me or said I was too big for my britches. There are definitely class barriers to aspiring to these kinds of art forms. And I think we're seeing that as a big problem in the United States right now, too, that there is kind of a resentment about the people who create and participate in that kind of culture, as opposed to, country music, homemade music. Well, not that country music isn't, sophisticated and there's a lot of money behind it, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's considered a popular art, not a classically trained art. I'm thinking a lot about that, and so that's what the next novel is about. And I'm just as soon as we're done here, I'm going to get back to it.
Well, I'm excited about that one. I am gonna immediately pick it up and read it as soon as it comes out because that is right up my alley, and I think a lot of people's alleys. I would argue that the class divide in Appalachia, but also in the rest of the country, is something that has been chronically overlooked, especially from a
Yep.
political standpoint,
Yep.
to many people's peril, unfortunately. So I think the
Yes.
more that we can talk about it and talk about it in different mediums, like a novel, I think
Mhm.
is important. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Thank you. No pressure.
No, none, none. I look, I'm easy to please when it comes to books. So I mean, you
No,
already got
I
me
just
hooked.
Well, I feel so lucky that I get to do this for a living, that I get to make up stories. And I feel a sense of duty because I enjoy my job so much, because I'm so lucky to get to do this amazing thing that I didn't grow up imagining I would be allowed to do. I want to do my best to give my readers something that um, brings them joy and also helps them think about their lives and the world in a new way, and also just helps them to be glad to be alive.
Yeah. I love that. And I think that's a perfect way of approaching it. And I think that you definitely accomplished that with the books of yours I read, especially Demon Copperhead. So I really appreciate that. And I appreciate you being so generous with your time today. This has been a really wonderful conversation. I've really enjoyed it. And I wish you all the best of luck with Higher Ground. I'm excited to see that program, like I said, blossom and grow and become an important part of the Lee County community, which it already sounds like it is. So that's really great.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Chuck. This has been really a pleasure.
Of course.